anyone who's a foreign national for any crime that's imprisonable, they should just be deported. And these guys were selling children with men stood outside hotel rooms or in flats or waiting outside takeaways, 20 men, 30 men, 40 men a night, and the police are complicit.
Is it a Pakistani problem or is it a Muslim problem? Roger.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Liam.
Yeah, thanks for coming. You've got a very, very powerful message that you're spreading at the moment, and it's unusual in the fact that you've been very outspoken about the Muslim community.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Being a Muslim yourself, I believe.
100%, yes.
Okay, so this puts you in a very good position to speak, and it gives the audience something to really take notice of, because this isn't some football hooligan talking about them not coming over on the boat. This is a very serious issue from a person within the same community. So you've been campaigning against grooming gangs for, I think, 6 years?
6 years, completely accidentally. I think like many people, to my shame, when I first came across the topic, I didn't believe it. And then I thought it was a far right sort of thing. And then I looked at it, and the more I looked at it, I thought something clearly there. And then one thing led to another, and an old gentleman passed away last year now called Warren Bates, former councillor, contacted me, had helped clean up the local mosque. The mosque had a chairman who was a convicted sex offender. My friend's wife contacted me, really worried about her children. We got rid of him, campaign got rid of him, but essentially he was protected there, and he was protected there because he was politically connected.
And he was the chairman
of the local mosque. Chairman of the local mosque.
How did he manage to slip through the net?
Because, as the police told me at the time, and the council safeguarding people told me at the time, they didn't care. And the reason they didn't care was because he had political connections. He was a former Labour Party candidate. Photographs with the now MP, Jim McMahon. All of this we talk about, there's a political undercurrent to why it's been allowed to fester. And it's not one I knew of at the time. It's one I discovered on the journey.
Before we get to your discovery, just so that I get a better understanding of your past, I know you worked for counter-terrorism for 15 years, but if you can give me and the listeners a bit of your background so that when it comes to what you found out later on down the line, it'll all sort of make more sense to everybody, and certainly me.
Oh, sure. This is what they struggle with in terms of countering me. I'm not a far-right hooligan. I'm not a criminal. I'm none of those things. I first spoke out about what was Islamist extremism, or the beginnings of Islamist extremism in the United Kingdom in 1997. So, I've got a track record in this. When 2001 came along and the Twin Towers went up, 2005 when the Underground was bombed, by that time I was advising the government. I was sat in rooms with secretaries of state and sat in rooms with prime ministers, advised all of them on my perspective of this, and also my perspective on the fallout in our communities. So I sat on the government task force to do with what you call community cohesion, fighting against what we now perhaps call, we call it Islamists, don't we? We call it, Islamists. I was fighting against them long before people realised they were a problem. And I was fighting against them, and I first spoke out against them because I could see that they were becoming increasingly active in the communities where I grew up. And I personally found it challenging. I found it challenging where, young people are always drawn to causes, aren't they? And it's easy for young people to be drawn to causes, and it's easy to manipulate young people to think that they are the victims and they are the oppressed, and here's this other group that they belong to that happens in gangs and stuff all over the world. But I'd never seen it before in this way. And unfortunately, we've not dealt with it, Liam. We look at it, we're 30 years on from 97, give or take. Yeah, we're 30 years on from when I first started speaking from it. And it's just a cowardice. Cowardice from our governments. And I look to the way in which the United States has reacted and responded, most recently with how, where Trump's come in and some of his priorities. And I think there's a recognition in other parts of the world that there's a cancer in Western society, in liberal Western society. Our kindness has been exploited, and we need to deal with it before it takes over.
When you were advising political parties about the rise of Islamists. What political party were you aligned to at the time?
Oh, Labour. I'm a working class bloke. I grew up in a mill town called Oldham. There was only one show in town. I wasn't really politically active, but I've to this day, I've never voted for anyone other than the Labour Party.
There'll be a lot of people that think all Muslims are Islamists and all Islamists are Muslim. Do you think you could sort of
I'll try
draw
my
a line
best.
in the sand between the two? Because you're a Muslim, but you're not an Islamist.
Yeah, and I reflected on this because in many spaces, in my own community, there's people who refuse to accept me as a Muslim because I'm not politically driven, in terms of a politically Islamic. There's two things, I think, fundamentally. One is, if I'm born here, if I'm raised here, then my loyalty is to the nation where I think that's a given for most people. Islamists don't think that way. Islamists believe that they belong to this global caliphate, and it's their role and their job to expand the caliphate. Fundamentally, that's what an Islamist is.
To evangelise others.
By whatever means.
Including extreme violence.
Fundamentally. And to have extreme prejudice towards those whose beliefs and cultures they consider to be inferior. And I think that is what you are seeing played out with not just the grooming gangs, but look at the poor kids who are stabbed in Southport. Every year it's the same. Some lunatic is driven into a crowd at a Christmas market.
But the thing is, despite the fact they're caught with a Quran in their glove compartment and they're shouting Allah Akbar as they're doing it, the mainstream media try their very best to report that it's an isolated incident and mental health is the problem.
And where has that got us?
The mess we're in now.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah. And where has that got the legitimacy of the mainstream media? More and more of us look at them with complete contempt and think that they're spinning a lie. Whereas Keir Starmer hiding the truth about Southport and Yvette Cooper hiding the truth about Southport got us. What's the consequences? It isn't just an impact on the general public's trust of our elected leaders. There's also a fallout in our communities that somehow people like me and people from my backgrounds are being protected. You're not protecting me. This is we are just, and this is one of the other reasons I speak out, we are just another piece on a board of a game being played by some of these politicians. The reason I speak out the way I do, and the reason I reaffirm to everyone who I speak to that I am a Muslim, I'm Bangladeshi origin, I am a Muslim, but I'm also British and my loyalty is to the land that raised me. And the reason I speak out in the way I do is because the likes of Keir Starmer need the Muslim community to feel oppressed by the wider white community, to feel as though you white folk are going to get them, are going to kill them, are going to, and they need protecting, and only the Labour Party can protect them. And that way they guarantee and deliver the block votes. Our communities held hostage, and there are people within our community who, benefit from that arrangement, and there are others who naively, like all communities have, fall into that trap. If we don't support these, because if the Labour Party isn't here to protect us, who will protect us from, sorry mate, bald-headed white men like you who look like, yeah.
Look like I'm ready to go.
Yeah. You understand, yeah. Yeah, so
the thing is, I've got no problem with stereotypes either. I'm sort of the least. You just couldn't offend me if you tried. I know I fit the profile.
Yeah, but you understand, don't you? You understand, and there's a game being played here.
I completely understand.
And that's why Starmer, and we'll talk about the grooming guys, but that's why Starmer, first of all, came out and talked about the need to protect mosques. Is this nutcase with an Al Qaeda manual and Rising, who goes and finds a dance class with small children and kills them and tries to kill many more people. And the first thing you're thinking, what about the fallout in the Muslim community? No. You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Prime Minister. What you're trying to do is provoke and antagonise and demonise the wider white community who know what's gone on. Every one of you knew what had gone on. How many of you believed any of his nonsense about, it's a nice kid from Cardiff?
A Welsh church going.
Yeah. How many of you? No one. No.
But a lot more people are they're awake now because they're sick of being lied to. So they've done further research because no one likes to be played for a fool, especially when lives are at stake, in particular children's. Let me ask you a question. You worked for counter-terrorism for 15 years, so there's probably not many more people as qualified as you to answer the following question. When that Southport degenerate murdered those 3 children, when the police went to his house and found the ricin and the Al-Qaeda manuals, in your professional opinion, how long would it have taken before the likes of Starmer was informed?
Minutes. So what happens is the Home Secretary would get a call. It'd go up the police chain immediately. The Home Secretary would get a call. The Prime Minister would be informed. So, in context, once they walked down that street and laid flowers and blamed the far right and all the rest of them, people were angry. By that point, you could see people were angry. What a leader should have done is said, listen, this is horrific. This is a terrorist attack. And we as a country need to deal with what's took place. And I guarantee you, if a leader had behaved in that way, there would not have been any riots on the streets. He provoked the riots. That's my opinion, and that's my professional opinion on what's took. He provoked him. Yvette Cooper provoked the riots. And then they call you all far right. Right? And yes, attacking a mosque is wrong. Yes, trying to burn down. No one's defending any of that. But the environment in which that was whipped up, and I'm separating this, I think you appreciate why. It wasn't that these 3 children were killed. It wasn't that they were killed by the man now we know. The violence that came about afterwards and the rioting that came about afterwards, the match that lit that was that we knew our politicians, our leaders had lied to us. And he did that I, to this day, looking at him and looking at her and knowing the world they operate in, they did that intentionally. They did that intentionally, so the fallout would happen the way it did. They could go heavy-handed the way they did in terms of some of the sentencing. And now, if you talk about these issues, you're far right. And you will be punished, and this will happen, and you're the same as that guy who tried to blow that up, or you're the same as that guy who did something else. And for most people, unfortunately, and for most people, decent people, they look at that, and even though they want to have an opinion or say something, they stay away from it because they got families, they got kids, they got jobs.
I feel like they're trying to antagonise the public again. They're coining the Southport terrorist the Amazon killer, almost giving him a Bond villain name.
Oh, and it's not just that. Look at the distraction and diversionary tactics there. We now want to focus on where he got the knife from.
It's insulting.
Yeah, bugger off. Sorry. Where we got the knife from. My daughter could go into my kitchen and pull out her kitchen drawer and get a knife. This is not about where he got the knife from. This is about understanding where did he get the ricin? Where did he work out where to get ricin from? What compelled him? What was the undercurrent that compelled him to go and find an Al-Qaeda manual? Where did he get that from? Not just where did he get that from, but what was going on in his mindset at the time? What did he already have those views and opinions? If he already have those views and opinions in terms of a jihadi, because that's what he was. For me, this is a classic textbook jihadist attack. It's not what did the police say? You can't say terrorism was a cause. Well, what was it then?
He was also reported to prevent terrorism, weren't he? Three times. So what's the protocol? If somebody is reported to terrorist prevent, where does it go from there?
I worked in the early days of prevent, so it's not a space I've occupied for the last 10 years at least. But I remember what prevent was. You would refer someone to prevent if you thought there was an issue in terms of they are at risk of violent extremism. They're at risk of being exploited by violent extremism. So there's 2 things. One is you're at risk of actually committing crimes yourself, or you're at risk of being exploited by those who are. So those are the 2 factors. From what I can read, that's been released so far, he wasn't at risk of being exploited. He was at risk of committing the crimes, wasn't he? He had a knife with him and all the rest of it.
He was caught 9 or 10 times with a knife.
So that would have gone straight to the police. They have these multi-agency panels. Those panels would have met, they'd have looked at the files, and they thought, okay, if he's at risk, there'd be an intervention. As in, we put him on the monitoring, we bring him in, we bring his family in, we try to understand what's going on and see whether we can do something about that. He'd go on a register, he'd go on a list, and if he was referred 2 times or 3 times and no intervention took place, even though he'd been referred 3 times, there's something else going on there.
It's heartbreaking to hear that, because those girls should still be alive.
The system didn't fail.
It didn't need to happen, did it?
The system is set up in a way, and I would argue based upon every other instance I've ever seen of the system failing in this way, that people's views and opinions come into it. We're too scared of upsetting someone, or what will happen here. We don't want to be judgmental. We don't want to be stereotypical. So all of that, and I'm of the left. I was trained by the left, and I hold them with complete contempt now. All of that fake liberal thinking that has got us into the mess we are. And if it wasn't for that, those 3 children would be alive. How does someone have a knife in a school and then get expelled? Why is he not in a young offenders institute? Those are easy decisions taken at every opportunity where an intervention should have took place, didn't take place, to protect that young man, and they protected him, in my opinion, because of his demographic. And liberal Western thinking of, ethnic minorities are naturally oppressed, are naturally the ones who need defending, and they need second chance, third chance, or in this guy's case, God knows how many chances.
All this far left thinking and this liberalism that has led us to the mess we're in now, in my opinion, is extremely dangerous. You're here talking out against that kind of ideology, but yet you're considered dangerous, aren't you?
Oh, the Labour Party described me, senior leaders in the Labour Party have described me as a dangerous man. They tried to put me in prison and failed.
Is this to do with exposing the grooming gangs?
It's to do with exposing the grooming gangs. Essentially, I spoke out. The first one who tried to have me in prison was a woman called Debbie Abrams, and I named them. I named them because all of this is evidenced. She went to the police, doctored some tweets or social media posts to make it look like I'd harassed her and abused her, and she was the victim. The police called me in. My lawyer looked at me, I looked at him, and we had the full trail of exchanges, which portrayed a very different exchange to what a now chair of a select committee in government portrayed.
The full chat log showed a different story.
Yes, and when I objected to it, you know what they said? Everyone does that. And I laughed. I said, so everyone fabricates evidence to try and get someone else arrested and convicted, like bugger did.
Can we roll back to the start of this expose? When you was initially told, you moved away from Oldham, you then come back, and a friend of yours told you that there's a pedophile that's chairman of the local mosque, and then we sort of veered off because I wanted to get your backstory. Let's go back to that. This is really important.
It's important because I think it also demonstrates it's not something I went looking for. It is a series of life events that take you to a place, and if you believe in a higher power, then maybe there's a reason I was put there. I try and make sense of it. Like anyone tries to make sense of life. I returned to Oldham for 2 reasons. My relationship had broken down, and I had a very young child. She was just over 1 year old, 2 years old at the time, and I, as a father, I wanted to make sure she grew up knowing her father and him being part of her life. And my mother had been diagnosed with cancer. She was terminally ill. She lasted for 5 years, but I wanted to make sure that I took care of my mother towards the end of her life. Came back, and it's a small community that I grew up in, and people saw me around a bit more. And I get a phone call from a friend's wife. The chairman of the mosque is a convicted sex offender. We need your help. We've got children. We're scared. Legitimate concern for any parent. I didn't believe her. I said, no, there's a whole host of safeguards in place. This shouldn't happen anymore. I made a phone call, an email, to the local authority designated officer. Lado is the person in the local authority responsible for all of this sort of stuff to do with children. Went all quiet. Then it came back via someone else. An email to the words of, we know we've spoken to the police. We don't care. I went and asked people I knew what was going on. I said, he's powerful. He controls lots of votes, and he's connected with the Labour Party. He was a former candidate, and he is a former senior member of something called the OBA, which is the Bangladeshi Association. I describe them as cartels. Every town with these sort of minority communities have them. They present themselves as community organisations, but they're not. They're a lot more sinister. What goes on underneath in terms of controlling votes, controlling communities, deciding who gets what grants in terms of where the money goes. And it's not a strange, it's a very dodgy relationship with the council. So you'll have them in. So for instance, those who doubt me, Tower Hamlets, for instance. Yeah, one of the biggest ethnic minority communities. The mayor of Tower Hamlets, a guy called Lutfer Rahman, got thrown out of politics. And basically what he did, he came in and realised that, he was going to take over the grant system and look after his boys rather than what the Labour Party were doing. So the fight when he got thrown out wasn't and he's now back in charge, by the way, wasn't to do with what was right and wrong. He was doing the dodgy business.
How do they control the votes?
Postal votes.
What's that? Bring the community into the mosque and basically say, sign here?
No, it's worse than that. So the way in which the mosques operated, particularly in the communities where I come from, the mosques have, like any other place, they'll have a board of trustees or a management committee. The management committee of my local mosque, every one of them, I think, bar one maybe, but probably most of them, if not all of them, are Labour Party members, active Labour Party members. And the MP would come in, sit down, chat to them all the time. Some of the committee members were Labour Party councillors. The mosque was run by the brother of a Labour Party councillor. And they would be very active to say to the congregation that we support this man, whoever the Labour Party politician would be. So there's that subtlety of we as a community support this person, we as a mosque support, and there's power in that. If you go back some time in the history of this nation, if the church took a side, then the congregation would take that side. It's changed, it's evolved. We're more secular and less God-fearing as a society, I think, than perhaps we once were. So there's that underlying condition. But postal votes were introduced by a man called Tony Blair when he got into power in, I think, 1997, if not, or 2001. I'm not sure when the law changed. But before, postal votes were given to the elderly, those who were ill, those who, perhaps soldiers who were overseas. There's a reason why you could vote by post. Blair changed the rules so that anyone can vote by post.
Right.
So to vote by post, what essentially happens is you simply fill in a form and your ballot papers arrive. You sign your ballot paper, you put a cross on it, put it in an envelope and send it back. If I was into what's called postal vote harvesting, would do this. I get something called a marked register. So if I'm a candidate in an upcoming election, I have a paper of every person who can vote. Next to the name, I have a mark on it. And this is all legal. This is how it's done. This is how it's presented in a way where, you can rig it. Yeah, you can. So next to the name, I have a list of everyone who's voted before. And if they have voted before, there's an X or there's a mark on it to say a P, I think is, to say they voted by postal votes before. So if I was in the business of rigging an election, everyone with a postal vote, I would go and see and apply whatever pressure I needed to. Some would do it voluntarily. Some would need convincing. And what they would do is sign their postal vote, but not put an X where it needs to be.
Right.
And I would collect their ballot papers in the envelopes ready, and I would take them to a place such as a mosque or the community centre, and I would deposit them there. And if I took 10 or if I took 100, then that gives me status in that cartel, in that network of people. And that allows for postal vote harvesting. So that's when people say postal vote harvesting, that's what happens. So that's what the first tier of postal vote fraud looks like.
Would there be consequences if people didn't play ball?
Yeah, of course.
Conform?
Well, for instance, in the town I come from, the leader of the council, and again, fact, the leader of the council hangs off the arm of a convicted heroin dealer. The guy was the getaway driver for the cop killer Dale Cregan. There's another guy involved with her called Zia Hussein. He was convicted for kidnap and torture. When the police turned up, he'd tortured 2 young men, I think, broomsticks, all the rest of it. And whatever you saw, you can think of, he did to them. Blood splattered all over the wall. These are the sort of gangsters who operate with red rosettes as Labour Party campaigners.
This is where your cartel element comes in.
Yeah, so when one of these guys knocks on your door, is it worth it for you? Is it worth it for your wife? Is it worth it for the 2 adult children who live in your house? You will hand them over. And they do hand them over. Some do it willingly because they get brownie points in the, in that gang that they belong to. But most people hand it over because they want nothing to do with it.
No repercussions.
Yeah. The next thing that happened, which is interesting, is that mark register shows you everyone who doesn't vote by post, who goes to the ballot box and puts an X in, in secret, because that's one of the safeguards of our electoral system, isn't it? You go to a polling station. Yeah. There's a little thing there. No one knows where you put the mark. You fold it up and you put it in. You don't want to be doing that. Here's a form for you. Sign up for a postal vote. We'll look after it for you. Thousands. They hide, in the same way they hide the figures about the number of gang members and how many children were gang. The stats have disappeared. Or we don't collect the stats.
Based on nationality.
Yeah. They need to do an audit on postal votes, how it's overrepresented in certain communities and others, and you will see the direct correlation. What I know and witness firsthand, the stats will fully back it up. The overrepresentation of postal voting in Muslim communities and how that has impacted upon elections. Liz Truss, there was a news story in the Express recently where she makes reference to Islamist MPs. It's not me. This is the former Prime Minister making reference to how we've now got Islamist MPs, not Muslim MPs, Islamist MPs. And that's the former Prime Minister saying that. And they were all elected off the back of a campaign using Gaza to exploit that Muslim division and oppression sense in this country. And the Palestinian cause, and what they did was they created a group. I think it was muslimvote.com or something. There was they created a campaign, and that campaign identified 81 constituencies where the Muslim vote would determine the outcome of an election. And that Muslim vote is then harvested back for postal voting, and off you go. It's wrong. And when we look at what's going on in these communities, you've got to deal with it. It's a cliche. They're using our democracy against us. Well, this is a tangible example of how our democratic freedoms are being used against us.
And how does the mosque, the postal votes, the cartel, how does that all tie into grooming gangs?
The mosques are run by the same families who have political connections. So, for instance, the management committee of the mosque would also involve councillors or the immediate family members of the councillors. So the families, these are families, these are clans, these are families. And then the grooming gangs, for many of them, and I look at Oldham as an example because we've done the work there, someone like Shabir Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, he was an active Labour Party member and he was a kingpin in the local community. So it wasn't just some nobody taxi driver who was up to mischief. This was a guy who was front and centre, having photographs with senior MPs, turning up to meetings, sat on the board of trustees, board of management committee of the Citizens Advice Bureau, worked for the council in a prominent position.
And also involved in criminality.
So what's happened, and this is, again, you've got to take time, a little bit of time to understand it. Historically, our communities had community leaders. It was always the way. Our communities had, and basically that meant someone would speak for us. Because back in the 60s and 70s, not everyone spoke English, not everyone wanted to deal. So we had people like village elders. I think if you want to look at it that way, like a village elder or someone who the community looked up to, then would advocate on behalf of our needs. Over time, what's happened is a criminal element has moved in. So where we have counsellors now from our communities, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, you have counsellors. Increasingly, we see these counsellors. I have immediate family members who are convicted drug dealers or money launderers. So you've got one guy who's a politician. His brother is a senior member of an organised crime gang group, convicted drug dealer, heroin dealer, money launderer, whatever, yeah? And then you'll have a third person who's a legitimate businessman. And the money you can see the triangle. Yeah, you can see what goes on. And that's what's going on. It's going on in Bradford, Oldham, Huddersfield, all of Rochdale, all of those places, what I've just described to you. But the politician is looked after by his brother, the muscle. The businessman cleans all the money and provides the money for the campaigns, and the votes are harvested that way. But where it gets worse, I think, is that those in positions of power, for instance, the MPs, know of the arrangement of postal votes, know of the criminal associations, look the other way because it guarantees them 10,000 votes. Rochdale, Oldham, Jess Phillips's backyard, look at all those places, look at the power of the Muslim vote, and then analyse how that Muslim vote votes. And you'll see it's disproportionately postal vote. Analyse to have a look at the councillors who sit beneath the MPs and have a look at who they are, who the family networks are, and it will all unravel. Yeah.
We all understand corruption and people in power, they rub shoulders with each other, they turn blind eyes because they're gonna benefit financially or through status. But at what stage do people start turning a blind eye to children being raped? Is there a timeline where you can remember that, okay, there was heroin dealing, there was money being washed, there was a whole plethora of crimes being committed, but then the line was crossed? And is that because the Muslim community had such a strong arm over the politicians because they knew they had that much on them, because they kept quiet about all the other stuff? Was it a case of, well, we can now do this because if you start penalising us for doing this, we'll blow the whistle on everything you've covered for us in the past? Is that...
So there's an element of blackmail, yeah, in terms of, well, the blackmail would be, we will withdraw the vote and go and support someone else because they know how powerful the vote is. In terms of the grooming gangs and how it evolved and the heroin dealing and the drug, I think, and I've gone back and looked at this. It's not something I saw firsthand at first, but you go back and you look at it and think, okay, maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what it is. And then you start to put the pieces back together retrospectively. I think the grooming took place anyway. I think it goes back to the 60s and 70s. So the grooming gangs are not a 90s phenomenon. They're historical.
Right. Within which community?
Within the Pakistani community and small elements of the Bangladesh. And I pick on those two because historically it's those two communities that are the Muslim communities. The majority of Muslims in the United Kingdom historically come from the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi communities. Now, you look at what's took place there. The heroin dealers looked at it and thought, okay, I can only sell heroin once. I can sell a child 1,000 times, And these guys were selling children with men stood outside hotel rooms or in flats or waiting outside takeaways. And there were, and these children will tell you, these young women now will tell you, I'm sure they have told you, 20 men, 30 men, 40 men a night, nights in succession, weeks, months in succession. They were sold. They were sold by these men, and they were sold by these men and these gangs because these gangs were politically connected. They knew, they 100% knew that they were protected. And I'll give you a tangible example. I met and spoke with a retired detective chief inspector, retired DCI, sought me out 2 weeks ago. He'd gone to Bradford. Bradford refused a vote for a public inquiry. The council had blocked a vote to have this investigated. This DCI told me of what he'd witnessed himself. He'd done some surveillance, witnessed himself, took it to the police. He got a phone call from the council. Some head of safeguarding sat there, threatened to arrest him for trying to investigate child sex exploitation, for following people. He left that meeting. An even more senior police officer phoned him told him to back off because it would upset all of the good work that's been done so far in that community.
Wow.
This is systemic. The cover-up is systemic. And the cover-up is systemic because of the arrangements. Those people at the top of the police, at the top of the political spectrum, the civil service, in terms of local governance in town, have got with these kingpins in these communities who are the voices of the community. I talked to you about a community leader. Yeah. He was a nice old man who would, that's not the case anymore, Liam.
They're now gangsters.
Yeah, or they have immediate family members who are, blackmail, if there is blackmail, because it is blackmail, is the block vote, which goes back to the Operation Muslim Vote or whatever it was that set up just before the general election, that's identified all the areas and said, these are the areas where the Muslim bloc vote can have an impact.
And we're not just talking about child grooming, we're talking about human trafficking now also.
So this is the thing. The ones who get arrested and convicted are the ones who were involved in the immediate grooming. Yeah, like building up the relationship with the child, however they did it, plying them with heroin or vodka, getting them drunk and having first dibs at them. Excuse me, but you understand what I mean by that.
Yeah.
But once they've finished that, they have then trafficked these children across the country and they're selling them to thousands, tens of thousands of men. So if we're talking about the industrial scale grooming and gang rape of working class white girls in this country, up and down the country, by Pakistani heritage gangs, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm quoting statements from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, from the leader of the opposition, Kenny Badenoch. So I'm quoting what we've now forced into the mainstream in Parliament. That hasn't happened by accident. It's because we and people like me have repeatedly said, this is what's happening, and it doesn't matter how often you call us far right or racist, this is what's happening. Now we need to move to a space where we appreciate, no, we can't just look at the dozens of gang members who were involved in grooming these children and initially gang raping these children. We need to look at their customer base. And sorry, their customer base is not the same as a heroin dealer or someone who buys some cannabis. The customer base are men who've gang raped children. And if the conservative estimate is 100,000 girls, what is the numbers of their customer base?
Is it a Pakistani problem or is it a Muslim problem?
I think it's a combination, and I get threatened for this all the time. And I can only share with you my analysis and my understanding.
Or Bangladeshi for that matter.
Yeah. I would start with saying it's a Pakistani problem because the Pakistani heritage grooming gangs are operating a clan-based structure. They hide each other's indiscretions. There's a disproportionate number of first cousin marriages. So I think it's over 50% of that subsect of that community marry their first cousins, and there's another scandal there that needs to be dealt with. I think in terms of the disabilities with the children that are born. The repetitive first cousin marriage. I think one of the Reform MPs brought it up recently in Parliament and got shouted down. But the facts are there. You marry your first cousin too often, and your children have a whole host of defects. So that creates a culture of keeping things secret. Yeah, you can't gossip on your cousin. You can't. Yeah. And we talk about the need for Britain to pay for its role in slavery 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, even though it was Britain that abolished slavery and then sent the Navy out. We were selective. Those civil rights lefty sort of people. Yeah. Mate, in 1971, the Pakistani regime, there was a civil war between East Pakistan and West Pakistan. So East Pakistan became what we now know as modern-day Bangladesh. West Pakistan, the Pakistani regime, sent their soldiers over to basically wipe out the Bangladeshis. 3 million were killed in 9 months. It's only India's intervention that secured what became modern-day Bangladesh. But part of the strategy of the Pakistani regime, and this is important, and it's hidden, is genocide. And Elon Musk used the term genocide to criticize Jess Phillips as a genocide apologist. Genocide is using rape as a method to impregnate, and kill off women and impregnate them so that the children, the offspring that are born, are no longer of the race of those you've committed those crimes to. The Pakistani regime promoted genocide. Matter of fact, 400,000 conservative estimates, even The Guardian reported on it, 400,000 Bangladeshi girls from the age of 9, 10, 11 were rounded up and repeatedly gang raped. And they legitimized this because the clerics in Pakistan, in West Pakistan, said these people are racially inferior to us. They are not the same sort of Muslims as we are because they're close to Indians and they've been influenced. Their Islam is is polluted. And it's important because we're only 2 generations on from that. Not one of those men were prosecuted, nothing happened to them, but the attitude of using an interpretation of the faith to say these people are less than us, carried through, culturally carried through.
And you think that's what's happening in the UK now?
Well, if you speak to every survivor, any survivor, they will clearly say that whilst they were being gang raped, it was made clear to them that they were white trash. You know, far worse words terms than that, mate, but you know, you understand my generalization, yeah? And if you speak to any of the men who were convicted, they will, in their own testimonies, they make reference to how they believed that these, you know, white people, you deserved it. You deserved it because you're culturally corrupted.
Have you spoke to many survivors?
Yes, spoke directly to survivors. Horrific. I've cried. I've seen people, you know, I've worked in refugee camps. I've seen all the horrible stuff. You can see that, yeah? And what survivors in my own country, in my own town have told me, what happened to them. And I reflect and I think, why? It's because I always believed we were better. We were okay. We'd figured it out. These things happen in, you know, in the backwaters of Africa or South America or somewhere in the Far East. They don't happen in a small mill town. Don't happen in Manchester. The police shut down an operation with the council. They'd identified 97 members of a rape gang. 97 members of a rape gang. And the operation gets mysteriously closed down. Come on. I'll tell you what happened. Those men were politically connected and someone made a call somewhere and that operation got shut down. And to this day, the minutes of that meeting, who ordered the shutting down of that, which police officer ordered it, which council officers, which politicians were sat in that meeting, no one's got the minutes of the meetings because the minutes were lost.
Very convenient. Yeah, who has the power to shut down an operation like that? Who has the power?
This predates the Manchester mayor, Andy Burnham, who's neck deep in the scandal himself, so I can't blame him because these activities to predate that. It would have to be the highest level police officer. It would have to be the highest level council officer. It'd have to be the highest level politician. It'd have to be the highest level MPs. At the time, there's a man called Tony Lloyd. He was an MP for Manchester at the time. Tony Lloyd went on to become Police and Crime Commissioner. He's dead now. He was the MP for Rochdale before he died. The previous MP for Rochdale, Simon Danchuk, has now gone on record to say that Tony Lloyd, who was at the time, as well as campaigning to become the Police and Crime Commissioner, which he successfully became, he was also chair of the Labour Party committee in London, you know, in Parliament. So, you know, a very high profile, powerful MP, Tony Lloyd, told him to shut up about the gangs because it would cost them votes. So this is not a far-right conspiracy because the evidence is repeatedly stacking up from a whole host of places, and it's all about protecting the votes. And it's not just about protecting the votes. This is about protecting the underlying conditions that allow things to continue as they are. And so what if some white working class girls pay the price on that journey? After all, the narrative that was sold to all of us is they were making lifestyle choices.
Yeah, I've read that. That's sort of, within sort of, it actually brought a tear to my eye. It's like, how dare you?
I've got a 10-year-old daughter, mate. Lifestyle, get stuffed. A 10-year-old making a lifestyle choice. A choice where she is upstairs in a takeaway and, lied on a bench like this with men after men taking turns on her.
It's shocking for me to hear it from a man of Muslim faith that you live in Oldham. You've seen it firsthand. And it hits that little bit harder. Here's a question. You see, so I'm from down south, and I obviously speak to my Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Muslim friends.
And what did they say on this subject?
Well, they say that it happens in the deep, twisted villages of Pakistan somewhere, but they don't think it's as big as how you know it to be. I think they're just in disbelief and think it's been blown out of proportion.
Well, all I can say is it's happened. The evidence is it's at least 50 towns and cities across the country. The evidence is that it is done the same way. through that sort of clan-based grooming, group-based grooming sort of. The evidence is covered up in the same way. And the evidence also suggests that there's an underlying political dimension to those who benefit from not rocking the boat. I mean, in my town, and I put something on X a couple of days ago because so much has happened. They tried to put me in prison for the last 3 years, mate, for this. And so much has happened. But the Labour Party, lawyers wrote to me last year, threatening to sue me if I didn't stop talking about this. There was a leaflet I put out, black and white, the evidence is black and white. And I said, okay, I'll see you at the High Court.
Yeah, let's unpack all the backlash that you've experienced from the cartels, from the police. I mean, where are the police?
And the police are complicit. The police are complicit in what's took place. The police repeatedly falsely arrested me at the instructions of politicians, without a shadow of a doubt.
Under what grounds?
First of all, the leader of the council at the time, the woman called Arood Shah, had me arrested for racially aggravated public order offence. Mate, I'm a distinguished individual. If you want to speak to me, phone me up. I'll come to the police station. I'm posing no immediate threat. I'm supposed to have written something. If I've already written something, which I had, it was an article objecting to how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was being used to radicalise a new generation of Muslim young people, which it has. I think you can clearly see it as. I write. I object to it. I get my message out by writing and saying, this is going on in the places where I live. These are the policy implications, and we as a society need to do something about it. I'm not saying go and kill anyone or go and, I'm saying we need to be aware and come up with ways in which to address these things. It's what they paid me to do. She had me arrested, 8 of them. Dawn raided my house, dragged me away. Long and short of it was they wanted me to stop campaigning against her. Shut up. Trial collapsed. She refused to give evidence because her evidence was bogus. It was made up. Another time the police arrested me. I'd incited rape. Dawn raided my house. Incited rape. It turns out I'd written a Facebook post where I'd used the word saw, S-O-R-E, in a sentence. And that sentence was to do with a reporter who had been harassing me, writing stories about me. I said, okay, I'll write a story back. And it was one of those young women, naive, new to a multicultural sort of place, an idealistic view of what that world looks like. And I responded by saying, you know what? You live on a nice boat somewhere in the south. You've come up and you live in Charlton or Didsbury, one of those nice places. But if you came and spent an evening in the world in which I live in, with the lived experiences of people like me, because you portray me as a far-right racist, I would take you to these Asian areas and you would see that the world isn't black and white. And there are many people in these communities that support me, but don't have the courage to come out the way I have. And you would leave with a sore head, as in a headache, because your worldview had turned up. There's no ambiguity in the way apparently the word sore meant I'd incited her, dragged me away, fell apart. Another time they arrested me. I'd objected to jihadists openly inciting my murder. They knew about it. They refused. So I lost my rag. I went to the mosque, put a video out. I said, come on then. If you want to harass my terminally ill mother about what you're going to do to me, if you want to harass members of my family, I'm here. Come on, come and get me. I'm waiting for you right here. They came and arrested me. And when they arrested me, they had a fast-track charging decision ready to the CPS to have me locked up. And as they told my legal team at the time, what they wanted to do was have me locked up so I couldn't campaign in the election. Because by this time, I'd made it political. I know how to get back at these politicians. You take them out of the ballot box. There's no point protesting outside a civic centre or signing a petition. You hit them where it hurts them. You remove them from power. And I'd removed, when the Labour Party, when I got involved, the Labour Party controlled 47 of the 60 seats. By the time I finished with them, they now control 27. So they're a minority group. They run a minority-run council. And we targeted every one of their leaders. So we took out leader after leader after leader. And they objected to that. So they tried to have me imprisoned to stop me campaigning.
Well, a few years back, that would have possibly sounded like a bit of a tall story to some, but we now know from the Southport riots that Labour do use lawfare, and they can fast-track things when it suits them.
Well, you've seen it, haven't you? You've seen how they've convicted.
Yeah. This is of no surprise to me. Yeah. Are the police force Muslim?
No, there are Muslims in the police force. They phone me, but I have white friends in the police force. And they're horrified. They're embarrassed.
And are there two types of Muslim?
Realistically, no. You're a Muslim or you're not.
Okay.
But it's how you see it. Now, I've always seen it because I'm a product of a multiracial sort of society. Yeah, my father died when I was young, but he was a man who came to this country by accident because he served in the Second World War. And at the end of the war, the boat kicked him off in Liverpool and told him to make his own way home. So I come from a place where my family have a deep sense of pride of living here and belonging here.
Yeah.
Now, if someone said to me, where do you belong? I belong here.
This is your home.
This is my home. And I don't think anyone who knows me or any one of your listeners, having listened to me, will have an issue with that. But unfortunately, what we've now got is an increasingly political demographic of Muslims who see the country that they should belong to, the one that raised them, the one they were born in, that as their enemy.
And how do other Muslims treat you since speaking out?
A lot of them struggle with me. A lot of them have tried to incite my murder openly. They describe me as a gay Christian convert, publish my address online with a view of, because if you're gay and if you're a Christian convert in the community I come from, it means you can go and kill them.
You hear these things that, in an ideal world, Muslims would have gay people thrown off buildings. And then when you say that, people say, no, that's not true. That's only in, extreme countries under Sharia. I mean, how realistic is that in the mindset?
Well, the prejudice. My sexuality, your sexuality, I've not asked you, what's it got to do with me? What's my sexuality got to do with anyone? This is a liberal Western democracy, but I'm not going to play this game of where I'm going to say I'm not gay, so you can reaffirm your prejudices towards, oh, you're a racist. Oh, no, I've got white friends.
I'm with you.
Do you understand? That's what they want. And that legitimizes their prejudice towards that demographic. I know what's going on. You know what's going on. But the Christian convert bit, mate, they want me killed. They want me killed because they want me out of the way. The Islamists want me out of the way. Because there is a demographic of Muslims, and this is one of the reasons why I say to people, I am a Muslim. There's a demographic of Muslims who think like me, but we're losing. We are losing this fight.
And is that the definition of a moderate Muslim?
I don't think there's such a thing as moderate. I look at this.
Because that term gets thrown around.
Yeah. No, listen. The Islamists are terrorists. The jihadists, they're different. A Muslim is what? It's a man who or a woman who follows a faith. And what is any faith? What are the fundamentals of any faith? It's a rule book of how to conduct your life so you contribute to society, so you make a difference to the world, so you help others. And that's the world I was born in. Now, if I get that through faith, great, but I know plenty of people who have those values and they don't come from faith. And I know plenty of people of faith, of a whole host of faiths, who have none of those values. So the older I've got, the less I understand it. And it'll be easy for me to distance myself from that community. It'll be easy.
Yeah.
But I can't allow myself to be distant because I would be abandoning the very people from that community who I know who are decent, who want this solved. I have yet to come across a single person from any community who agrees with the gang of children.
Is there any link between the Prophet marrying Aisha at 6 and then consummating the marriage at 9 in his 50s? Is there any link between these grooming gangs and that kind of behaviour? Does it justify it in a Muslim's mind?
So the reference you make is from one of the hadiths, and there's a whole host of conflicting of how true that hadith is and how it's conflicted with someone else. I've not got into that. I'm not an Islamic scholar. What I will say to you is there is a demographic, and you see it in the Taliban, for instance, in Afghanistan. I think they're just changing the law, aren't they? They're changing the law so you can marry children again. And they look upon that group, those men, they look upon the time of the Prophet and the norms of the time of the Prophet, the societal norms of as an ideal time, which is why they blow up televisions and all the rest of that sort of stuff. Mate, I'm looking at you now, the barbarians. Even in the West, we've changed, haven't we? From what was a societal norm. We wouldn't say we want to go back to the times of when men like you were serfs and you belonged to someone. We've evolved.
So as a Muslim, you don't think your Prophet is above criticism?
As a Muslim, this is my viewpoint on it.
Kind of veering off, but I'm interested.
No,
I'm interested.
Absolutely.
And you know why I'm asking this?
Yeah, absolutely. There are many watershed moments in how we've got into the mess we've now got. And just bear with me, and I think you'll understand how I try and convey this. One of those watershed moments was the satanic verses. And Salman Rushdie wrote a book, yeah? And he was recently attacked, lost an eye.
I was going to say, consequently stabbed in the eye.
Yeah, many years, and he's had a fatwa against him from, and all of that. So
for years,
for decades, since I was a child. I was 18 at the time, and I remember looking at places like Bradford, these men buying these books, the satanic verses, the United States flag, the British flag, and burning them on the streets. And I found it difficult to align in my own mind that, hold on, there's someone who's written a book of fiction. He's criticised the Prophet in it, and you want him killed. How wrong is that? If you don't, this is what I can't square up. I struggle with. I believe in freedom. I believe, we enjoy the life we do because we have a whole host of freedoms. If you want to criticise my faith, go for it. Well, how is that affecting my faith? And if it is affecting my faith, how brittle is my faith? Let him write his book. So what? If I want to read it, I'll read it. If I don't want to read it, I won't read it. But I'm not going to go and burn it and protest about it. And I'm sure as hell not going to support a death sentence on a man. We look at the Charlie Hebdo thing, the cartoons. I think the magazine's in bad taste, but it's in bad taste to a lot of people. He's got a long record of...
They've recently depicted Donald Trump and Elon Musk having sex.
Yeah, it's so fucking what?
The Monty Python.
Yeah.
The Life of Brian. Could you imagine?
No. Is my faith so brittle? So what? Because what's taking place there isn't me defending my faith in terms of, legitimizing those attacks. It's that political dimension where we in the West, and I use the word we in the West are seen as the enemy. And they'll find anything they can to frame that narrative that way. And of course, religion is an easy one for those people to do. And they've done it for forever. And I'm sure they'll do it forevermore. Mate, I'll be honest with you. There's the Dutch guy, isn't there, who goes on about burning the Quran and stuff, yeah? Wilders, yeah? Listen, do I agree with it? No. Do I think my God will somehow want me to go and kill someone who does that? I don't think that.
Yeah.
And I can only be the person I can be, and I can only do good where I can do. And I'll let you judge. And this is one of the other reasons they want me out of the way. Because Muslims like me reach out to people like you, and we not like you just per se, but the wider community. And what happens then is you see the world as more nuanced because I'm presented as more nuanced. And what extremists always want to do is polarize two sides as two extremes.
Is there any elements of your faith that you disagree with or disapprove of?
Stuff like the contextualization. Certain things were done at certain times because of the historical conditions that existed. For instance. So, for instance, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine 2 days ago. I've known him since he's got 3 wives. He's got a wife here. He's got a wife in Turkey and he's got a wife in Morocco. And he flies around and sees each wife. And I'm like, well, how do your kids take to that? How do your kids take to it? He goes, well, you've got to be a strong man, and they deal with it. And I asked him, well, where did you get the historical context from? It was allowed. I said, yeah, it was allowed because the tribe was so small at the time. The men were all dying in war, and things, and they were going to be wiped out. So there's a context of what took place, and he goes, oh yeah, but the brush over that, because
he's using the religion to his full advantage.
Yeah. And I think if he had a better understanding of the religion, not that I have, but I think if he had, I think a lot of the ways in which it is used to subjugate certain groups would not happen in the same way.
Could you ever see yourself leaving Islam?
It's why it's a part of me. I mean, it's a part of my identity. It's the same as my. I'm a Liverpool supporter. I was at Anfield last night for the game.
I'll tell you why I'm really glad that you said that you wouldn't leave Islam is because Islam isn't going anywhere. And Islam needs people like you.
We need to find a way to live together, don't we? I mean, this is the thing. Yeah. We either need to find a way to live together,
because
if we don't, where do we end up? Where do we end up?
You've said certain things today regarding your faith that would be frowned upon by some Muslims.
100%.
And could put you in real serious trouble.
100%.
I mean, give me the extent of trouble that you could be in for talking against Islam, being a Muslim yourself.
They'd kill me.
And that's a fact.
That's a fact. They'd kill me.
Are you afraid of dying?
For this cause, the need to take care of the most vulnerable in society to make sure that our children grow up safe.
No.
I made an arrangement with my friends, immediate friends, a long time ago, that if they took me out, that they would take care of my daughter. And that's it. And you can see I'm getting emotional over it, and that's it.
What's your stance on Tommy Robinson?
I get asked this, and first and foremost, I think it's important that I share my starting point, because I think my starting point is like many people in this country, where we look at him, because we're framed by the media, and he's this extremist, is this, and that way. And then I went to look at, and I've never met the man, by the way, I've never met the man, but I think I'd like to meet the man at some point in my life, and I look at him and I think he's on his own journey. Where you start off in life does not mean where you end up. I've worked with people who are convicted terrorists, who've gone on to involve themselves in the running of countries. I've spoken with guys who were locked up in Robben Island. They were all on a journey. They had a cause, and the methods they perhaps used earlier on was not the methods they used later on, but it didn't make their cause unjust. So I say to you, what is his cause? And I look at that and I think he clearly, deeply cares about an underclass, a demographic that's left behind. How am I to judge that negatively? A man caring about a demographic that's left behind. Do I agree with his methods? I don't think he would agree with some of the methods he's used. Do I agree with some of his life choices? I don't think he would agree with some of his life choices. We've all been on a journey, and we're all on a journey, and none of us are clean here. Yeah, we've all done things in our lives, and we all look back on our lives and think, I could have done that better. I think Tommy Robinson has another chapter when he comes out of prison. And I pray that he takes responsibility of the position he's found himself in, where he speaks on behalf of millions in this country who feel ostracized, demonized, and dispossessed. And I hope he can be a part of the discussion and discourse that takes these people and himself to help shape and build a country that's home for all of us. That is my hope for him. And I think prison does things to people as well, particularly the sort of prison he's enduring. And to confirm, I think he is a political prisoner. He might have committed a crime, but he's been politically persecuted. I think whatever crime he's committed, the way in which he's being punished does not reflect that. There's clearly a political undercurrent there. And, I've got no notes here. I've got nothing. You never said to me you'd asked me that question, and I've answered it as honestly as I can.
Yeah, no, this is a fascinating conversation. I'm very pleased that you've got the courage to actually go around and speak to people, because this conversation, this interview would never ever make it onto the mainstream, and that is why these podcasts are so important.
Not a single mainstream legacy media publication will speak to me. The BBC, ITV, even GB News, even though I speak to the reporters offline, and not one of them will speak to me, because I bring a perspective that takes this to a place where it's too uncomfortable for all of them. Because in the end, this is about power. In the end, this is about power. And we are all just pieces on a board for those who want to maintain power.
You and Tommy have got more in common than you think. I mean, you and Tommy Robinson, you're actually trying to save and protect the exact same people. The establishment. How much do you think they fear you currently?
I think it's gone too far, because I come out and I explain to you what's going on. And I evidence it, and I articulate in a way where it makes sense. I'm from their world, so I understand the mechanics of what's gone on and how they've gone about exploiting it. I've specifically named people. They've tried to sue me. They failed. They tried to put me in prison. They failed. It's now got to a point where ours is becoming the dominant discourse in this. It isn't whether the our children. It is how many. Who did it?
Are you expecting an attack from somewhere else? Are you prepared for when either the media machine or the establishment or the cartel come for you with force?
I think the cartel days are gone. I think it's gone too late for them. They've tried earlier on and it didn't work. I think the media has gone as well. The worst they did, I mean, they published me in the Sunday Times as a racist, and they got in touch with me. And I remember I looked at it and thought, I grew up thinking the Sunday Times, what a headline newspaper. And it worried me for a minute. And you know what I did in the end? I sent them a photograph. I said, here you go. Use a nice picture. And now it's clear to me the lies the media have told about me, the smears, none of it sticks anymore. Because thanks to people like you, none of it sticks anymore. I look at the local newspaper, and it was one of my lowest moments. They'd arrested me in the morning, and by the time I came out, I was picking my daughter up from school, and the local newspaper had run a story in partnership with the police and some of these gangsters, and they'd run a headline that a man, 48, had been arrested for child sex exploitation offences. So they made it out as though I'd been arrested as a child sex offender, and the online Labour Party affiliated Facebook sort of pages had said, this man is Raja Mia, this is who he is, this is his address if anyone needs it. And I remember picking my daughter up from school and everyone staring at me.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And then we've gone on a journey where it's now clear that it was a smear. And those who thought worse of me or bad of me are now my strongest defenders, because they need to square it in their own minds. That, hold on, this guy, what's he done? He refused to look the other way to the gang of children. I mean, how incredulous we're having this conversation. How incredulous that the establishment he talked about had a vote in Parliament 2 weeks ago, would have voted against a public inquiry into the gang of children across this country.
Well, you've got a better insight as to why they've refused that.
I think they've refused that because of where it'll take them. And it'll take them to their doorstep, because I have named MPs involved. I've named MPs involved in the cover-up, and they go to the highest level of government. And Kemi Badenoch got up and spoke at Prime Minister's question time. She made specific reference to how it incriminates ministers in Keir Starmer's cabinet. And I evidence everything. So I'll evidence it and I'll quantify it. So, for instance, Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister. When Andy Burnham's report came out into the cover-up of the gang, and it was a whitewash, and we knew it was a whitewash, and we ripped it apart at the time, the 3 Labour Party MPs for Oldham, with which Angela Rayner's one of them, the other one was Jim McMahon and Debbie Abrams, released a shared statement and comment letterheaded paper where they made reference to this was one of the most thorough reports ever, and we now need to move on. And then he stood up in Parliament, McMahon and Abrams stood up in Parliament and made reference to me as racist and far right, and all the people who supported me as extremists.
And who are you supposed to be racist against?
I've stopped, yeah. And Watson has since come out, and Burnham being the career politician that he is, and it's took us 2.5 years, 3 years for him to admit this, he's admitted to failings in his report, and his report was limited. So on what basis did the Deputy Prime Minister say this was the best report ever written, or one of the best reports ever written?
Is this the Alexis J report?
No, this is the most recent one by Andy Burnham called an assurance review into Oldham. And what we exposed in that was this assurance review into the cover-up of the gang of children in Oldham. The 2 investigators have run away now because, clearly they can't cover it up anymore. And the report they wrote makes no reference to how many children, which you'd think a report would, yeah? They took a sample of 10, and in all 10 they found serious safeguarding failings. They wrote in a nice style of language how Oldham had an innovative approach to dealing with children who in the care system who are at risk of sexual exploitation. That innovative approach they don't really expand on unless you learn to read between the lines, which is essentially they opened a children's brothel. So they put all the children in that care home together and made sure that the Asian taxi drivers can come and pick them up as and when they're pleased. So that's an innovative approach for you. But the report itself failed to interview a single survivor. And it only interviewed one survivor after Maggie Oliver got involved.
That's disgusting.
So how can you have an investigation into child sexual exploitation and you don't speak to the survivors? How is that one of the best reports ever written?
Well, it's not an investigation.
Well, Angela Rayner has questions to answer, doesn't she?
God, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is there an anti-white movement in Oldham? Because it's white British children that are predominantly victims of...
I think if there is an anti-white movement in Oldham, that anti-white movement comes from a number of sources, one of which is the white middle classes. They look upon the working class white with complete contempt. That's my honest observations, experiences.
Oh, I've noticed that too. We're in the middle of a class war.
Yeah. I was raised in a working class neighbourhood alongside white working class people, as well as, you know, and I say this story because I think it's important. The first time I saw a SWAT sticker, it was painted on my door. It wasn't in a textbook. And I remember coming home at lunchtime, being ushered off, you know, to school, coming home at lunchtime. And my dad was scrubbing it off. His sleeves rolled up, you know, jacket down, because he was that generation who always wore a shirt and tie.
Yeah.
And another, one of my white neighbours and him having a bruise, scrubbing it off together. You know, this is a class war. And there will always be those who want to try and provoke and make it into something else, which is why I make a point of being clear to people that I'm not just here as a Muslim, I'm not here as a brown person, I'm not here as a working class person. I'm here because I represent all, because I'm fortunate enough to have grown up in a world where I have relationships and take value from the person I am, from growing up in a world where a working class white woman fed me tea, as well as my auntie who is a devout Muslim, you know, all of those things. And I see good and bad everywhere.
How do we navigate our way out of this labyrinth we're in?
We need better leaders. We need better leaders.
Strength.
Yeah, we need better, because leadership is so vital. And you look at Stam, that's not a leader. You know, you need better leaders. And leadership comes from not just textbooks, it comes from experience. You've got to have a lived experience of these issues, because that's where your credibility comes from. And you need to be prepared to say the right thing, even though it's unpopular. And if you look at some of our politicians now, the sound bites, aren't they? You see it. Come on.
Cannot take him seriously.
Give me some substance. I'm happy for you to disagree with me. I'm happy to disagree with you on a whole host of things. We won't agree on everything, but at least it'll come from a place of value.
Well, this is where the likes of Tommy Robinson are essential to the growth and development of the country, because he has got lived experience. His cousin was groomed and by gangs of men. He's not reading off a script. He's lived it.
And I hope to God that when he comes out, that he reflects, he looks backwards, looks forward, and he becomes the man that he needs to be to help this nation heal.
Would you consider Tommy Robinson an extremist?
How can I consider him an extremist? I question some of the people who hung around him. I look at some of all that. But he's gone on a journey. Nelson Mandela was considered to be an extremist.
And how do we cure the cancer of these gangs? How do we get rid of these gangs?
We need to first acknowledge it happened and where it happened, and how systemic it was. And that's what a public inquiry would do. It would say, look, this is a national shame. 100,000, maybe more, of our children were groomed and gang raped by this demographic. This community clearly has an issue. In the 80s, 70s and 80s where I grew up, where white people had underlying racial prejudices as more of a norm. As a society, we trained, we educated, and people became better. But we acknowledged that there was an issue. We refuse, to this day, to acknowledge that there's an issue to do with either the Pakistani heritage or the Islamic element of the motivation. Despite the overwhelming evidence, because evidence comes from the experiences of those who were victims and those who rationalize why they did it. That's where the evidence comes from. You don't need any university professor to work that out. You just need to look at the victims and the perpetrators and look at why that took place. There is a deep lying issue in the communities where I come from of prejudice, anti-white prejudice. And if we are to move forward as a society, where we learn to live with each other, in the same way in which anti-racist training was done or a whole host of schemes took place where we addressed either the overt or the unconscious prejudices of white people towards ethnic minorities. Well, now actually it's gone full circle, and we need to look at how we address the underlying prejudices and of people who look like me towards the white community, in particular the working class white community. And there's also that undercurrent we talked about, that class prejudice within the white community itself. There's layers to this, but we need to accept it exists, and we need to deal with that. And then for me, I'm clear on this. Those who covered it up and gained from covering it up, particularly the politicians, they need to go to prison.
That was going to be a question of mine. What should happen to anybody that's caught and it's proven beyond any reasonable doubt that they were complicit in the cover-up of the rape of our children?
They should go to prison. How else can it be? We put people in prison for attending protests and holding up little banners. And you telling me some of the most powerful people in the country, the people who held up banners had no power. Some of them got caught up in it. Some of them didn't know how else to articulate their frustration. And we've got some of the most powerful people in our country who made active decisions, politically calculated decisions in what to do and what not to do, and now are complicit in the cover-up. And I've named them. I've named some of the most powerful people in the country. Andy Burnham's review. It's a joke. He knew it was a joke. How dare he commission a review like that, where the investigators don't even question a single survivor, and he fronts that. I don't care who he is. He should be made to explain what he did.
Held to account.
And held to account. And that means he goes to prison, so he goes to prison. Jim McMahon, he should go to prison. He was the leader of the council where he openly conspired with a BBC journalist called Kevin Fitzpatrick in hiding news of the grooming gangs. And they used the funeral of Lee Rigby as an excuse as to what they did. It's in black and white. I've released the information. He should be in prison. Debbie Abrahams for doctoring evidence. We mock her in our town. We call her Debbie Kashmir. She cares more about Kashmir than she does about the kids in her own constituency. She should be made to answer for her crimes. Angela Rayner, I think she just got caught up in it. I don't think she did it on purpose, but she put her name to a document on Commons letterheaded paper as a facilitator in that cover-up. If this was a drugs gang, what would happen to her?
And what sort of tariffs would you issue? What jail terms?
This week, the police released a statement. I think it was West Yorkshire Police. 50 years or something, as a headline. And then you break it down and these bastards were getting like 2 years or 3 years each for gang raping children. Listen, the world moves on, society moves on, and the place we are now in is not the liberal utopia that we once believed perhaps we could build. It's moved on. First and foremost, anyone who's a foreign national for any crime that's imprisonable, they should just be deported. That's not an extremist point of view. I think that's now increasingly a mainstream point of view. If you don't belong in this country, or if you're here by invitation, and you're committing crimes against our people, and you're here by invitation, why are we wasting our time putting them in prison for 1 year and 2 years and then letting them re-enter our society? Just deport them. How is that an extremist view?
It's common sense. It's safety first.
Yeah. And those who belong here, how are we putting people in prison longer for writing things on the internet than we are for gang children? There should be minimum sentences for these offences. No questions asked, minimum sentences. Which one of our politicians is going to be brave enough to bring this forward?
I can't see any of them.
Because I look at the Conservatives, and I'm naturally not a Conservative, being a northern working class lad, but I look at them and I think, you've had 14 years. You knew about this. Local Conservatives I know wrote to the government pleading for intervention.
Yeah, it's important not to let them off the hook either. They've played their part.
Yeah, and now they're suddenly on our side. I'm great that you are, but I'm sceptical.
When it suits. Where were you when the children needed you?
Yeah, I look at reform and I want to like them.
Same.
I want to like them. I would never have said that to you, mate, a couple of years ago.
No.
I want to like reform.
I think people should be big enough to say that if presented with new evidence, it's okay to change your mind, which sounds to me like that's exactly what you've done. Which,
Well, I'm a product of the left. And look where I am now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your take on Donald Trump? He's now in the White House officially.
It's great, isn't it?
How many other Muslims would say that?
I look at this and I say it's great because look what they did to try and stop him from getting elected. And then I think, and this is the establishment. So how much must they fear this man if they went to the extent they went to, including, someone trying to kill him? Look at that country now. They believe again.
Oh, the atmosphere.
Yeah, they believe again, don't they? They believe in
the optimism. Well, it's contagious.
And look at our country.
Doom, gloom, depressing, fear-mongering.
We call ourselves the United Kingdom, yeah? We need our leaders to come forward, a generation leader who will unite our kingdom. Because right now, our government is at war with its people.
Yeah, right now we're just kingdom.
Yeah.
There's nothing united about us at all. And I tell you what I really, really want, and I mean this implicitly, more of this. People from different sides of the world, different backgrounds, different childhoods, different faiths, different skin colours, to unite, black and white unite, brown and white unite, just everyone, if everyone's on the same page morally and their principles are in line, like your family, doesn't matter what colour you are. And the more we let the mainstream media creep in with that narrative, we need to block that noise out because we have got a lot more in common than people think.
They need to play us off against each other to maintain the power structures that they have that keeps them where they are.
It's infuriating when I see people fall into their trap.
I think it's tipped. I think it's gone. I think the far right thing doesn't work anymore. And I think increasingly what you'll see is those who are genuinely extreme in both the right and also the Islamists will become separated, and the rest of us will put aside our egos or our personal differences or our small insignificant differences. I was chatting to, I call him a friend of mine, Nick. He's the leader of UKIP now.
Nick Tenkoni.
Yeah. I saw him a couple of days ago. He came to Oldham.
He was sat there Sunday.
Right. I call him a friend. I'm in phone him. He'll say the same. And I said, Nick, you and I can disagree on a whole host of things. But mate, my house is on fire right now. You're coming with a bucket of water and you're helping me. Am I going to argue with you over things that, no, our nation is burning. Everything that we value is at stake. Our small differences we can thrash out later.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. Before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you want to say either to me or to people watching and listening without me preempting it?
We can win this. We are winning this. Everything, you've got to understand, they have thrown everything at us. All of us. They have thrown everything at us and we are still here. And every day our numbers are growing. We will win this. And I just hope that the politicians who lead us find a way of working with each other.
And they need to start listening to the people more.
Absolutely.
Well, I've enjoyed that, and I'm really glad that you took the time to come and drive 5 hours to share your story with me. And one last thing, everything that you've said today, can it all be backed up?
Yeah, everything's evidenced.
It's all evidenced?
Everything's evidenced.
Okay.
It's what I do.
Okay.
It's the world I come from.
Yeah.
Everything I talk about is evidence.
Yeah, I wouldn't want you to get in trouble. And also, my final word is that I really hope this journey you're on, this pursuit to alleviate trauma and future of our children, I really hope that you continue to do so and people take notice of your message and you're never in a position where you're in danger or worse still, hurt or killed. So really look after yourself.
I'll be happy if we fix this, we move on. I'll sit on a park bench with a flask of tea and a sandwich and I'll see the world go by and I'll know that when the moment came, I did what was asked of me.
Well, off camera, you showed me a picture of your beautiful daughter and you said, this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I respected that greatly.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, brother.
No, thank you, brother.